That day changed everything. Amid the laughs and champagne glasses at my sister Ashley's wedding, I watched my daughter, Sophie, playing alone in the corner of the reception hall. None of the other kids came near her. The disapproving looks from my relatives burned on my back as I adjusted the bow on her dress for the third time. "Emma, honey, we need to talk about your choices," my mom Catherine whispered, giving Sophie a meaningful look. Before I could answer, the hall doors swung open. A man with gray hair and an impeccable suit walked in. His eyes locked on me. Silence fell over the place. Something about the way he looked at me made my heart race. It was like he'd been waiting 35 years for this moment. 6 months earlier, when I signed the adoption papers for Sophie, I felt like my life finally made sense. Her small, bright eyes won me over the moment we met at the orphanage. She was sitting in a corner, drawing a family, a dad, a mom, and a little girl in a red dress. "Is that the family you want?" I asked, sitting next to her. Sophie just nodded, not taking her eyes off the paper. The social worker explained that she had come from Korea 2 months ago and was still adjusting. In that moment, I decided that we would be a family, even if not the traditional kind she had drawn. My mom, Catherine, almost had a heart attack when I told her about my decision. An Asian child? "Emma, why not choose someone who looks more like us?" Her words hit me like a slap. My sister Ashley stayed silent, but her look said it all. At the following family gatherings, Sophie was treated like an outsider. Nobody cared about her talented drawings or the fact that she was already picking up English fast. At Thanksgiving dinner, Aunt Martha accidentally spilled sauce on her new dress. "You're ruining the family harmony," Ashley said during a heated argument. "First you decide to be a single mom and now this?" But every rejection only strengthened my conviction. Every night, when Sophie hugged me before bed and whispered, "I love you," in her peculiar mix of Korean and English, I knew I'd made the right choice. We were different, but we were family. The wedding preparations for Ashley turned into a minefield of backhanded comments and tension. While I was helping with the floral arrangements in the hall, my mom wouldn't stop mentioning how peculiar it would be to have Sophie as a bridesmaid. "The photos have to be perfect, Emma. You know what I mean? They're keepsakes for the future." I swallowed hard, squeezing the white carnations between my fingers harder than necessary. Sophie was so excited about her lilac dress that she'd memorized every step of the choreography. During rehearsals, I noticed other moms whispering as she walked by. At the final dress rehearsal, Ashley made a point of rearranging the bridesmaids' positions. "Sophie will look better at the back so she doesn't clash so much." Her words sounded like poison disguised as honey. I saw my daughter's eyes get welling up with tears, even as she tried to hide them. At the welcome cocktail the night before the wedding, the groom's relatives made no effort to hide their morbid curiosity. "So, is that your social experience?" asked Ashley's future mother-in-law, sizing Sophie up from head to toe. "My daughter," I said firmly, holding Sophie's hand tight. Catherine, who usually diffused tense situations, stayed oddly quiet throughout the event. I noticed her growing nervousness, especially when they mentioned the important guests coming to the ceremony. "William Thompson has confirmed," I heard someone say. "The CEO of Thompson Enterprises will be here." For some reason I couldn't understand. At the time, my mom knocked over her wine glass when she heard that name. Her face went pale, and she practically bolted out of the hall, claiming she had a headache. That night, while helping Sophie practice her bridesmaid steps again in our hotel room, she asked me a heart-wrenching question. "Mom, why doesn't Grandma love me like she loves the other grandkids?" I sat down next to her on the bed, trying to find words to explain something I didn't even understand myself. The subtle prejudice of my family was becoming harder and harder to justify or hide. The wedding march started playing, and all the guests stood up to welcome Ashley. That's when he walked in. William Thompson didn't follow the protocol of waiting for the bride. He simply walked down the side aisle, his confident steps echoing through the hall. Something in his look froze me in place. From where I stood, next to Sophie, I could see my mom, Catherine, gripping the edge of a pew so hard her fingers turned white. The man stopped in the middle of the aisle, completely ignoring the bride's entrance. Catherine. His deep voice filled the space. 35 years is long enough. The musicians stopped playing. Ashley, still at the entrance of the church, stood frozen with her bouquet. The murmur of the guests grew with every second. "Mr. Thompson," my mom said, trembling as she stood. "Please, not today." "When then, Catherine? When were you planning to tell my daughter the truth?" My daughter? I felt the air leave my lungs. Sophie squeezed my hand, feeling my tension. William turned his gaze to me, his eyes, so much like mine, glistening. "Emma," he said as he stepped toward me, "you have the same eyes as her, the same eyes as Charlotte." My mom, Catherine, advanced down the aisle. "William, you have no right. I took care of her. I raised her." "As a nanny," his voice thundered. "You were the nanny who convinced a man shattered by the loss of his wife to give up his own daughter." The hall spun around me. His words pierced my mind like needles. "Nanny? Gave her up?" Sophie clung to my waist, grounding me in reality. Ashley, still at the entrance, shouted about her moment being ruined, but her voice sounded distant, like I was underwater. William Thompson, my father, kept looking at me, decades of regret etched on his face. "You were born on a spring day," he said softly, ignoring the chaos around. "Charlotte chose your name, Emma Charlotte Thompson. That was the last thing she did." The world I knew was crumbling, but somehow the pieces began to fall into place. The discomfort I had always felt, the subtle lies, the whispered secrets, everything was leading up to this moment. I staggered over to a nearby chair, my legs no longer able to support me. Sophie stayed by my side, holding my hand as if trying to protect me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My little adopted daughter giving me strength right when I found out that I was adopted too, or rather stolen. "Emma, please, let me explain." Catherine came closer, her hands trembling. "Everything I did was out of love." "Love?" William pressed. "You manipulated a grieving man. You convinced him he couldn't raise a daughter on his own, that she needed a traditional family. But the truth is, you never could have kids, and you saw your chance, didn't you, Catherine?" His words fit together like pieces of a puzzle. The odd comments from my childhood, the lack of photos of a pregnant Catherine, the way she'd always changed the subject when I asked about my birth. "You stole me," I whispered, tears finally falling. "You stole everything. My father, my history, even the name of my real mother." Ashley, who had finally entered the hall, exploded. "This is ridiculous. Emma, this is our family. Mom gave you everything." "Gave me?" My voice came out louder than I expected. "She gave me lies, raised me in a family that judges my Sophie for being adopted when I myself—" I couldn't finish the sentence. William knelt in front of me, pulling something out of his jacket pocket. "Charlotte left this letter for you. Catherine was supposed to give it to you on your 18th birthday. It was part of the deal." Catherine let out a sob. "I couldn't lose you. You were my daughter." "I was your employee," I corrected, the reality hitting me like a train. "The daughter you emotionally kidnapped." I clutched the letter with trembling hands. The paper was yellowed by time, but the seal was still intact. On the envelope in delicate handwriting it read, "For my Emma." "Your mother was an architect," William said softly. "She designed a house for the three of us on the coast. I never got to live there, but I kept everything exactly as she planned, including your room." Sophie, silently taking it all in, squeezed my hand. "Mom, are you like me?" Her innocent question pierced my heart. Suddenly I understood why I'd always felt so connected to her, why the need to protect her was so deep. It wasn't just motherly love, it was recognition. "Yes, sweetie," I replied, picking her up. It seems we both needed to find our real family. The hall was in complete chaos. Guests were murmuring, some were quietly leaving. Ashley was shouting about her ruined wedding, but for the first time in my life, I felt grounded. The truth, as painful as it was, felt freeing. "Let's go," I said, getting up and holding Sophie in one arm and the letter in the other. "I think it's time for you to meet my mom." I walked past Catherine without looking back. 35 years of lies were enough. It was time to find out who Emma Charlotte Thompson really was. and maybe finally understand why I always felt like a stranger in my own family. The sun was starting to set when we arrived at the house on the coast. The entire way, William, my father, told stories about Charlotte, how she insisted on working even in the last weeks of her pregnancy, how she designed every detail of this house with our family in mind, how her eyes lit up when she talked about the future. Sophie was sleeping in the back seat, exhausted from the intense day. I caught a glimpse of her in the rear-view mirror, thinking about how fate works in strange ways to fix injustices. I, who had grown up in a lie, found my truth through her. She wanted a butterfly garden here, William said, pointing to an area surrounded by lavenders. Charlotte used to say that butterflies bring transformation. We walked to the front door. My hands were shaking as I held the still-sealed letter. Part of me wanted to tear it open right away. Another part was scared of what I might find in the words of a mother I'd never known. "Your room," William said, opening a door on the second floor. Charlotte spent months decorating it. The walls were a soft blue, with tiny hand-painted stars forming constellations on the ceiling. An old music box rested on a white dresser. Next to it, an easel with unused brushes waited for an artist who never came. "She knew you'd be an artist," he said sadly, smiling. "She used to say she could feel it in your kicks. Our little girl is going to paint the world," she always repeated. I sat on the still perfect bed, Sophie asleep in my arms. Carefully, so as not to wake her, I opened the envelope. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means you have turned 18. It also means I'm not here to see the incredible woman I'm sure you've become. I'm writing this letter in the last days of my pregnancy. The doctors say there are complications, but I don't care. You are worth every second, every breath, every beat of my heart. Your father is a wonderful man, but I know he'll be lost without me. If you're with another family, like we talked about in case the worst happened, know that it was all done with love. So much love that it hurt. I left something for you in the false bottom of the music box. It's my favorite set of brushes, and the first project I sketched. This house. Finish it your way. Make it your home. You'll be born soon, and I already love you more than life itself. With all my love, Charlotte, your mom." Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. William held the music box, carefully revealing the hidden compartment. There the brushes were, along with detailed drawings of the house. "She never planned to keep me from you," he murmured. "Catherine. She took advantage of my most vulnerable moment. When I finally realized what had happened, she threatened to run off with you if I tried anything." Sophie stirred in my arms, slowly opening her eyes. "Is this our new house, Mommy?" I looked at William, who nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart. This is the house your grandma Charlotte built for us, long before I even knew we'd need it. Is there room for my paintings?" I smiled through teary eyes, thinking about how fate sometimes weaves its stories in mysterious ways. "There's room for all the paintings you want to make. After all, your grandma knew we'd have an artist in the family." In the following weeks, William helped us settle into the house. Catherine tried to contact me several times, but I blocked her number. Ashley sent a message saying I'd ruined her life. Ironically, the wedding was postponed indefinitely when her fiancé discovered some truths about her too. Sophie thrived in our seaside home. Her room next to mine quickly filled up with colorful paintings. She had inherited Charlotte's artistic talent, even without any blood relation. Another of fate's ironies. One particularly sunny afternoon, while I was going through Charlotte's old belongings in the attic, I found her diary. The pages were filled with sketches of projects, random thoughts, and mostly letters to me. "Dear Emma, today you took your first kicks. William was so moved he cried. I drew 3 new rooms today. I can't decide which one will be yours. Maybe you can choose when you're older." Each entry was like a little gift, letting me get to know that extraordinary woman who had given her life for me. William, whom I was now starting to call Dad, spent more and more time with us. He had retired from his company and spent his mornings teaching Sophie to tend the butterfly garden that Charlotte had dreamed of. "Your mom believed that butterflies were messengers," he explained one day as we planted more lavenders. "She used to say that when you see a blue butterfly, it's a sign from her. the next week, while I was painting on the porch, a blue butterfly landed on my canvas. Sophie, playing in the garden, ran excitedly. "Mommy, look! Grandma Charlotte came to visit us." I smiled through tears, letting them flow freely. It was amazing how an 8-year-old could understand what many adults could not. Family is much more than blood or paperwork. Last month I received a letter from Catherine. The letter said she was in therapy, finally facing her demons and the inability to have kids that led her to make such drastic decisions. Part of me was still too hurt to forgive, but another part understood the desperation of wanting to be a mom so badly. I'd faced prejudice myself when I adopted Sophie. "What do you think?" I asked William, showing him the letter. He sighed, watching Sophie play in the garden. "Charlotte always said that forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about setting yourself free. But the choice is yours, dear." That night, as I was tucking Sophie into bed, she asked me a question that really moved me. "Mommy, do you think Grandma Catherine will ever truly love me?" I sat on the edge of her bed, looking at the drawings she had made. Now they all had blue butterflies in them. "Sometimes, sweetie, people need to learn how to love. Maybe Grandma Catherine is still learning how I learned to love you." I hugged her tight, thinking about how true love doesn't need to be learned. It just exists, like it did between Charlotte and me even though we never met, and like it exists between Sophie and me even without sharing the same blood. "No, my love, you never had to learn. You just had to find me." 6 months passed since the revelation at the wedding. Fall was tinting the leaves golden as I finished another canvas in the studio we set up in Charlotte's old office. Sophie, now almost 9, had her own little space there too, a smaller easel next to mine. It was on one of those painting afternoons that I got a call. Catherine was in the hospital. A stroke, according to the doctors. I was frozen for a few minutes, my brush dripping blue paint onto the wooden floor. "Shall we go see her?" Sophie asked, her small voice breaking the silence. I looked at my daughter, so wise in her innocence. I thought about Charlotte and her words about forgiveness in the diary. I thought about Catherine, who despite everything had loved me, even if in the wrong way. "Yes," I finally replied. "I think it's time." William came with us to the hospital. On the way, he shared more stories about Charlotte, as if to give me strength for what was coming. "Your mom always said that the most hurt people are the ones who need love the most," he said as he parked the car, "even when they don't deserve it." Catherine was unrecognizable in the hospital bed. Her face, always so controlled and perfect, looked defeated. Half of her body wasn't responding. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Emma," she said weakly, "forgive me." Sophie, who had been holding my hand, let go and moved closer to the bed. With the delicacy only children have, she took Catherine's hand. "I made a drawing for you, Grandma," she said, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. It was a painting of all of us. Me, Sophie, William, Catherine, and even Charlotte, represented by a blue butterfly. Catherine cried even more, squeezing Sophie's tiny hand with her good hand. "You were always better than me, Emma," she whispered. "You loved without conditions, without prejudice, just like Charlotte would have." I sat at the edge of the bed, feeling decades of hurt and confused love melt away. "You loved me in your own way, Catherine. Wrong maybe, but you loved. And now we can try to do things differently." In the following weeks, while Catherine was recovering in rehab, Sophie made sure to visit her regularly. She brought drawings, told stories, filled the sterile room with her contagious energy. Little by little, I saw Catherine transform, her barriers falling away one by one. On one of those visits, I found them talking quietly. "You know, Grandma," Sophie said, "Mommy told me that sometimes people need to learn how to love. I can teach you if you want." Catherine smiled, a real smile, maybe the first I'd ever seen from her. "I think you're already teaching me, dear." That night on the way back home, a blue butterfly flew alongside us the whole journey. Sophie swore it was Charlotte, giving her nod to our choice to forgive. Looking out on the horizon, I thought about how love comes in so many forms. There's the unconditional love of Charlotte, who gave her life for me. The complicated love of Catherine, who had to learn to be less selfish, the pure love of Sophie, which teaches all of us. And then there's my love, which finally found peace in all its forms. "Mommy," Sophie called, "can we paint the story of our family?" "Of course, my love, every part of it." The painting that Sophie and I created together became the centerpiece of our living room. It was a big canvas filled with colors and meaning. In the center there was a non-traditional family tree with branches intertwining in unexpected ways. Charlotte was represented by the blue butterfly at the top, its wings spread out protecting everyone below. Catherine appeared in soft shades of purple, her figure gradually blending in with the rest of the family, like her process of healing and acceptance. Catherine's recovery was slow but steady. After 3 months of rehab, she accepted our invitation to spend a few days at the beach house. At first, it felt strange having her there, in the space Charlotte had designed. But Sophie, with her infinite capacity to love, made everything feel natural. "Grandma, do you want to help me paint?" she would ask every morning. And Catherine, despite her physical limitations, would sit in the garden to watch and give suggestions. William, who was initially reluctant about having Catherine around, gradually lowered his defenses. One afternoon, I found them talking about Charlotte, sharing memories of the same person they both loved so much. "She would have loved to see this," William commented during dinner, watching her extended, imperfect family gathered at the table. "Charlotte always believed love is about multiplying, not dividing." Catherine, who now spoke more easily, nodded. "I took so long to understand that. I used to think love was possession. But now you know better, don't you, Grandma?" Sophie smiled, holding her hand tight. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with the same colors as our family painting. A blue butterfly landed on the windowsill, its wings shining against the golden light. "Look, Mommy," Sophie exclaimed. "Grandma Charlotte came to dinner too." And in that perfect, imperfect moment, I realized that family is not something defined or limited. It's something we build, that we paint every day with all the colors available, even the ones that at first seem like they don't match. It's a work of art in constant evolution, just as Charlotte would have wanted. A year passed since that dinner. Catherine now lives in a small house near ours, where she can see the sea and be close to Sophie. Her transformation was remarkable. The stroke seemed to have taken away not just her partial mobility, but also her old bonds and prejudices. Ashley eventually got married in a much smaller, more sincere ceremony than originally planned. To my surprise, she came to me to apologize, admitting that she too had a lot to learn about family and love. Charlotte's butterfly garden is in full bloom. Sophie spends hours there, painting and talking with the blue butterflies that seem to appear more and more often. William says it's Charlotte, multiplying her presence to match our growing happiness. Today, while I was organizing old boxes in the attic, I found another diary from Charlotte. On the last page, there was a text that seemed hastily written. "Emma, if you ever find this, know that true love comes in many forms. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it heals, sometimes it needs to be forgiven, but it always, always is worth it." Sitting on the attic floor, I could hear Sophie's laughter coming from the garden where she was painting with Catherine. William was in the kitchen preparing dinner, an unlikely family, built from broken pieces that somehow fit perfectly together. And out there, as always, a blue butterfly danced in the wind, its wings shining in the afternoon sun, reminding us that love, just like art, doesn't have to follow any rules to be true and beautiful.